The story begins with our main protagonist called Baji, who was born deaf and couldn't speak. He was so weak that he couldn't even swing his sword and was despised by his own people even though he was the rightful first prince, unlike his brother called Data, who has a strong physique. As the first child, Baji fought hard to inherit his father's throne and to become the greatest king in the world. However, his people doubted him because he was so weak. The story focuses on a place called Basi Kingdom, led by a king called Basi. Basi was one of the strongest kings in his era who managed to rank 7th among the strongest kings. Unfortunately, King Basi began to fall ill in his old age and it was said that his life would end soon, so the king of Basi is required to immediately appoint which prince will be the heir to the royal throne. King Basi has 2 sons, Baji and Data. Baji is the son of his first wife who had died, while Data is the son of his second wife called Healing. Baji and Data are very different in terms of physique and strength. Baji has a small and short body with weak physical strength, while Data has a tall body and stronger physical strength. Baji has been mute since birth as he is unable to speak and has been deaf his entire life. Many people in the Basi kingdom do not want Baji to be the heir to the throne as they believe he is useless and weak, so they would prefer Data to replace his father on the throne. Instead, one day when Baji was playing on the hill, he met a shadowy figure who could talk called Cage. Cage approached Baji to rob his belongings, and we discover that he is part of a shadow clan who are fiercely loyal to the master they have chosen. However, several years ago the shadow clan was accused of treason, so the entire clan was captured and killed, but Cage is the only one left that still survives today. After Baji gave all his clothes and belongings to Cage, he immediately left and returned to the kingdom. Cage was surprised. He casually gave all his belongings away without second thought. When Baji returned, he was harshly insulted by the residents passing by along the way to the palace because the citizens knew that Baji could not speak or hear. King Basi, who was aware that Baji was often underestimated by all the kingdom, had tried to make Baji appear more authoritative by providing sword training to Baji with one of the royal sword trainers called Damas. However, due to Baji's small body and weak physical strength, he still cannot compare to the strength of his brother Data and always loses when he fights one-on-one with him. Data has a great fighting ability. Even Damas, Baji's sword trainer, is amazed by his fighting skills. After fighting Data, Baji was badly injured and suffered injuries to his legs and arms. Cage, who always secretly followed Baji, tried to comfort him when he was crying in his room. Baji felt very sad because his body was so weak, and he was always losing against Data. Since then, the friendship between Baji and Cage has grown stronger. A few days later, King Basi was declared dead and the royal advisors began to announce the contents of the will written by King Basi, where it's revealed that he decided to choose Baji as the successor to the royal throne. After hearing the will, Data was shocked and could not believe that his father preferred Baji over him. A very disappointed Data protested against the magic mirror that was given to him by the king as a gift. The magic mirror, which was able to talk, spoke to Data and told him that he need not to worry because in the end the kingdom would still choose him as the next heir to the throne. The magic mirror's prediction came true and Data was selected as the king of the Basi kingdom. As Healing and all the royal commanders had re-vote to choose Data and replace Baji. Baji felt very sad and disappointed with the decision. A few days later, Bibin, who was Data's sword trainer, informs Baji that Cage has gone to wander in the wild. Realizing that his best friend has disappeared, Baji decides to go searching for Cage. Although initially Baji's plan was opposed by Healing, but he was finally allowed to go to the outside world with 2 bodyguards, Demas and Hokiro. When Healing lets go of Baji, she secretly worries about him and feels that something bad might happen deep inside her heart. Healing cares for Baji, but ever since her real son Data was born, she had naturally became more fond of him. On the other hand, Data struggled to get a high rank in the assessment of the new king's rankings. After being tested by the judges, Data only got a rank of 90. Data often dreamed that his older brother would take the throne from him again. However, as suggested by the magic mirror, Data decided to take power from his father's dead body. Meanwhile, Baji, who has been on a long journey in the wild world, arrives at a hot crater called the Gates of Hell. Dimes invites Baji to take a closer look at the Gates of Hell, but it turns out that it was only part of Demas' plan to kill Baji by pushing him into the crater. Previously, Demas was ordered by Data to kill Baji. Knowing that, Hokiro felt very angry and immediately fought against a mess. As a result of the fight, one of Demas's hands was cut off. On the other hand, Baji managed to survive. He was protected by Cage, who had been hiding in Baji's back, and we discovered that it was Bibin who had sent Cage to protect Baji. During his journey, he advised Kage to take Baji and find someone who could train him to become stronger. Cage asks Baji to come with him to the underworld through a secret path at the Gates of Hell, as Baji and Cage were on their journey, a mysterious smoke suddenly appears and makes them fall unconscious. Several troops from the underworld kingdom then bring them to the underworld royal palace. Elsewhere, Data begins to perform a ritual to extract power from King Bossy's frozen corpse. His corpse was extracted to produce a magic potion that could make Data strong like King Bossy. However, at the last moment Data felt doubtful again and chose to throw the potion away. When Data was about to get out of the dungeon, the commander called Appias appeared and tries to kill Data. Appias is one of the royal officials who is very loyal to King Bassy and Bachi. However, Appias' efforts are prevented by the magic mirror, which is revealed to be the incarnation of a woman called Miranjo. Miranjo was a close confidant of King Bassy and had made Appias of great fighting power. Because Appias had already sworn allegiance to Miranjo, he had no other choice but to obey her wishes. He then makes Data fall unconscious and forces him to drink King Bossy's potion. It turns out the potion does not work to make him strong like King Bassy, but instead functions to revive his soul, and now King Bassy is back, taking over Dita's body and using it as a shell for his soul. Meanwhile, Baji and Cage had awakened from their blackout and have been brought before King Dessa, who is exceptionally powerful and ranks second of all the kings. As King Dessa knows Baji is the son of King Bassy, he was interested in finding out Baji's strength and fighting ability. Baji was then asked to fight one of King Dessa's commanders. He showed his speed by dodging every attack made by the soldier commander. Unfortunately, King Dessa was not impressed by Baji's evasive ability, so he expelled Baji and Cage from his kingdom. Before they left the palace, the commander told Cage that the person who was actually able to train Baji was the younger brother of King Dessa, called Despa. Baji and Cage get excited and immediately went to meet with the spa. When they arrived at Despa's house, Cage immediately asked him to train with Baji. However, before that, Despair asked Baji for a large amount of money before accepting him as his student. After Despair received a chest box filled with gold jewelry, he accepted Baji as his disciple. At first, Despised says that Baji doesn't have enough physical strength, so no matter how hard he practices he would never improve, but Despa will not give up on him and looks for the right method to find his expertise. For weeks, Baji underwent intensive training with the spa. The training results began to show when Cage saw Baji was easily able to destroy a large stone. We then get to see why Baji has such a small and weak body. Baji is small and short with little to no physical strength because of an agreement made between King Bassy and a demon, King Bossy, and Miranjo, who want to have extraordinary power, had to sacrifice something to grant their request by the demon. In addition to the age and life of King Bassy, the demon told him to have a child so that he could receive the power of it. On the other hand, Hilling, who received the news that Demas had killed Baji, was very sad and angry. Hillington decided to sentence Damas and Hokero to death, but before the execution was carried out, King Bossy appeared and stopped them. King Bossy said that Baji was currently alive and training somewhere. Then Demas and Hokero were released from the death penalty and only expelled from the kingdom after Hilling realized the person she saw in front of her was not Data, but the king of Bossy. She began to ask about Data's whereabouts. King Bossy ruthlessly replied that Data had disappeared, which made Hilling so shocked she fainted. Miranjo asked King Bossy for permission to go to the underworld at night. Miranda wants to gather more troops to increase King Bossy's power. The next day, when Hilling was awake, she came to King Bossy and asked him to return Data. Suddenly Hilling heard the voice of Data, who was currently trapped in King Bossy's chest. When Hilling was about to cleave King Bossy's chest, the head guard stopped her as he is loyal to King Bossy. Elsewhere, Baji had finished his training with Despa and Baji is ready to face his enemies. Cage initially doubted Baji's ability because his sword was very small. However, Dispel explained that in addition to Baji's ability to evade his opponent's attacks, he can defeat his enemies by attacking the weak points of each opponent. Baji and Cage thanked Despa for all the knowledge and training he gave. Cage then invites Baji to return to the palace and resolve the conflict, but Baji had doubts about going back as he was still traumatized by the assassination attempt on him ordered by Demas. Baji thought that it was Hilling's orders. However, after Baji reminisced about when Hilling loved him as a child, he was finally willing to return to the palace. On the other hand, King Desert realized that his youngest brother, called Alkin, had escaped from the underworld prison. King Dessa deliberately had his brother locked up because he had made a pact with a demon to become immortal. After King Dessa found out that Alkin was going to Bossy's kingdom, he decided to go with his troops to the palace and establish dominion over Bossy's kingdom. After Alkin and some prisoners from the underworld had arrived at Bossy's palace, they then captured King Bossy and locked him up in a dungeon. The prisoners of the underworld now controlled the royal palace of Bassy. Meanwhile, Baji and Cage, who'd been received by the underworld warriors from King Desha, went straight to Bossy's royal palace. However, Baji doesn't realize that the underworld warrior has a plan to take over the Bossy kingdom. On the way to the palace, Baji and the underground soldiers were stopped by Alkan. Hakan accidentally found himself in the middle of the city to slaughter the townsman. The underworld warrior commander, who remembers the spaz message regarding the warning not to let Baji fight Alkan, immediately asks Baji to go first to Boss's palace and protect Queen Hilling. When Baji arrived at the palace, he saw the two-headed snake that had always accompanied him being beaten by a giant called Gigan. Baji incapacitates Gigan, showing great strength, and asks Hilling to heal his beloved snake. Hilling was surprised to see Baji's strength before revealing that she had run out of healing potions. Luckily, Cage had a spare few bottles of potions with which to make more healing potions while Hilling was trying to heal the snake and several injured dogs. Baji fought back and defeated Gigan, who had arisen from his state of unconsciousness. The dogs that had previously been the companions of the prisoners of the underworld eventually became Baji's companions. Even Gigan, who had just been defeated by Baji, became obedient and swore allegiance to him. After that, the two-headed snake told Baji to immediately go to the dungeon to prevent the underworld forces from entering Boss's palace. On the other hand, Alkan, who was fighting the underworld warrior commander with his army, was suddenly struck by lightning. The lightning was magic sent by King Despised to defeat Alkan. The spell, who saw Alkan collapse, immediately tied him up with the rope he had prepared. Meanwhile, King Despised and the rest of the underworld army had already arrived at Bossy's palace through the underground gate. At the same time, Baji and Gigan had arrived at the dungeon. King Despised told Baji that he wants to catch Miranjo, who had released the underworld lords, and brought them to Bossy's palace. King Despised then reveals that Miranja was the mastermind behind all this chaos. Gigan, who did not want to return to the prison of the underworld, directly attacks King Despised. When King Despised was about to counterattack, Baji quickly prevented him. Suddenly, King Despised got a telepathic message from Despised saying that he would not win against Baji. This past suggested that King Despised retreat and let Baji fight the king of Bossy, so that when Miranjo is alone, Despised can defeat Miranjo and the cursed demon who was with him. After hearing the explanation, King Despised agreed and immediately promised Gigan a position as a warrior of the underworld kingdom if Gigan was willing to return to the underworld palace with him. After receiving Baji's blessing, Gigan accepted the offer and King Despised, along with the underworld army, returned to their kingdom. On the other hand, Miranjo has now been captured by the prisoners of the underworld. She begins to send messages to Alkan through telepathy, asking him to save her. After receiving the message from Miranjo, Alkan quickly untied the rope around his body and ran towards the palace. When Alkan arrived, he coincidentally ran into Baji and Cage. He intends to kill Baji, therefore the battle between Baji and Alkan is unavoidable. Even though Baji had stabbed Alkan many times, Alkan still survived and was not even injured. Baji, who realizes that Alkan was an immortal, had no other choice but to continue attacking him. Even the commander of the underworld army and Despa couldn't defeat Alkan. After seeing Baji almost being killed by Alkan, Cage turned into a giant shadow and swallowed Alkan. However, Alkan revives by piercing Cage's body with his sword. As a result, Cage died instantly. Alkan then kills Baji, who was already in a weak condition with multiple stab wounds. We then get to the moment when King Bossy was in prison, talking about his past with Miranjo. Data, still trapped in King Bossy's heart, witnesses the memory Miranda was once a child who came from a place called Hamara, the land of magicians. The residents of Hamara were the first humans who dared to oppose the power of the gods. Basi, who was wandering the country and was helped by Miranjo's mother, helped the people of Hamara vanquish the cruelty of the gods. At first all went well, but some of Hamara's residents made an alliance with the gods to fight the citizens of their own land. The treacherous alliance then killed Miranjo's mother and tortured Miranjo inhumanely. They cut off both of Miranjo's hands and skinned her face. Bossy, who knew this, was very angry and immediately killed all the traitors. Bossy then goes with Miranja to leave the country, and Bossy slowly begins to fall in love with Miranjo. They then met a demon and asked it to make Bossy the strongest human in the world. The demon granted Bossy's requests at the expense of his age and the strength of his first child. Miranjo, who realized that Bossy's life was coming to an end, made a plan so that she could resurrect Bossy after his death. Later, Miranjo deliberately makes Bossy marry Hilling and have a child, which was Data. From the very beginning, Miranjo had prepared Data to be the body for the soul of King Basi. After seeing the past, Data is furious with his father but feels bad for Miranjo. Data then promised Miranjo that he would replace King Bossy to protect her, as Data wholeheartedly believed Miranja was a good person. Data's assessment proved correct after Miranjo saw Baji had been killed by Alkan. She immediately left the mirror and entered the body of a soldier. She approaches the bodies of Baji and Cage to heal them. As Miranjo heals them, the spec can see glimpses of Miranjo's sad past. Dispel then told the memory to Baji and asked that he takes the appropriate action to solve this problem. A few moments later, Baji and Cage came back to life due to the healing of Miranjo earlier. When Baji rises again to fight Alchem, King Bossy suddenly appears and heals everyone with the healing power of Data. King Bossy then advanced toward Alchem and prepared to fight him. The power of Alchem's sword was unable to match the power of King Bassy, who retaliated by destroying Alchem with the power of his mace. However, Alchem can still rise again because he is an immortal king boss. He then had the idea of crushing Alchem's body into a ball of flakes and burying the body fragments into a very large boulder so Alchem won't be able to regenerate his body anymore. After that, King Bossy came to meet Miranjo, who was in the magic mirror, and apologizes for making her suffer tremendously in the past. King Bossy, who still loves Miranjo very much, says that he would go with her to the afterlife if he died in the last battle. It seems that King Bossy doesn't know that Miranjo's soul can't go to the afterlife because she has violated the agreement with the devil by resurrecting King Bossy again. After that, King Bossy told everyone in the palace that he would kill anyone who tried to take Data's body and bring him back to life. Baji, who still loves Data, chooses to go forward and face King Bossy. The other dignitaries Damas, Bibin, Dorsh and Apias support Baji. When Damas was about to attack King Bossy, Baji suddenly stopped him. This Bay explains that currently King Boss's is in Data's body, so the only person who can fight him without killing Data is Baji. The epic battle between Baji and King Bassy finally begins. At first, Baji could only dodge King Bossy's attacks while trying to find his weak points. After a while, Baji finally discovered King Bassy's weakness. He destroys the mace held by King Bossy and attacks his weak point. Within seconds, he was directly knocked to the ground. He then crawled over to Miranjo to destroy her so he could return Data to his original body. However, the attempt was prevented by Baji as he thought it could harm Miranjo. Miranjo, who saw the sadness in Bossy's face, chose to yield and asked Baji to destroy her magic mirror. Thus Data can regain control of his body. After Baji destroys the magic mirror, King Bossy's soul and Miranjo's soul fly up. The giant red devil who had made a pact with them suddenly appears and flies into the sky to eat Miranjo's soul. Miranjo apologizes to King Bossy because she can't go to the afterlife with him. A few seconds later, the red demon was struck by a thunderbolt sent by King Dessa. The commander of the underworld army immediately decapitated the red demon before it could recover. Despised then made an offer with the red demon. He would return the red demon's head if the demon was willing to grant one wish. Winspoon was about to say his request. Data suddenly appeared and set his request first. Data wants the demon to bring Miranjo back to life. The red devil immediately granted Data's request, and in turn Data has now fulfilled his promise to protect Miranjo. Seeing the presence of Miranjo, who was able to live again, made Despised happy, so he gave up his request to be taken by Data. And overjoyed Healing, who saw her two beloved children survive, hugged them both. In the end, everyone in the palace forgives Miranjo's previous actions, and she promises that she will change herself into a better person. After that, Data knelt before Baji and handed over the royal throne to him. From that day on, Baji received the title of king in the Bossy Kingdom, and everyone was happy to welcome their new king. Cage, who felt that his task had been completed, decided to leave Baji in Bossy's palace. The next day, when the inauguration for the new king took place, Baji realizes that Cage had disappeared. A confused Baji tried to find Cage throughout the palace, but his search was unsuccessful. Even though Baji has become a king who is loved by his people and carries out his duties fairly, he still feels that something is missing. Healing realized this and tells Baji that he no longer needed to hold back and was allowed to seek freedom with Cage. Healing always thought that Cage was a true friend who made Baji happy and shine brightly. Hearing this, Baji decides to return the title of king to Data and goes on a quest to find Cage. After several days of traveling, Baji was finally able to meet Cage again. He was so happy that he burst into tears, although initially Cage was angry at Baji for giving up his position as king. However, Baji informs Cage that he will wander and build an empire of his own one day, and this brings the anime to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video. Until next time, take care.